I'm here with one of my dearest friends, Father Louh from Jacksonville, Florida. He's the pastor at St. John the Divine. Some of you have heard me talk about him before. When I finished the last movie, A Marriage Made in Heaven, I was telling Father the other day, whenever I finish a film, the first thing I do, literally the next day, I go to church and then I start to get my spiritual batteries renewed. Everything gets drained out of you when you make film.
hmm
And in the process of doing that, I started listening to a lot of his sermons and also his wife, Presbyter Dr. Roxanne Lowe. She has some speeches that she has and some interviews the two of them do together. Every one of these that I listened to, I just walked away feeling great. And so I want to start sharing with all of you what has been so inspirational to me. And I think you all remember the book that I told you about. This book, I absolutely love, you guys. I'm starting to reread it again. And
Thank you.
I wanted to, first of all, welcome you, Father, and just thank you for the work you're doing. It's tough work. I know, especially to be a pastor of a large church and then do all this extra stuff like coming here today. So I really appreciate it.
It's an honor to be with you, Bob. I treasure our friendship, and I love what you're doing, the movies that you're producing, and more important, the person that you are. So you're an inspiration to us as well. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today.
Amen, Brother Lowe. All right, so here's the one. So I asked him the first one of these that I wanted to do, and we're going to do many of these. I absolutely love this story. I had read it in the book, and then when I went to Arizona, Father was speaking at a convention, and he told the story again, and he included a video, which we're going to include in this. And when I saw that video, I said, okay, we've got to do this. What I love about this story is I'm a firm believer that there are miracles that happen every day. And I think that they are similar to the time when Christ performed miracles. But I think that for some reason, Father, we just, oh, that's great, and we move on. And oh, that's interesting, and we move on. But I think that miracles are just as powerful today as they were back in the time of Christ. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think it's important because God gives us these divine interruptions, as we call it in the book, and there are opportunities where God reveals himself. And one of my favorite Bible verses is probably a favorite Bible verse for you and for many people as well. It's simply, be still and know that I'm God. But that verse, when you break it down, be still and know that I'm God. In other words, you can't know God or experience him unless you are still. And so when you take that moment of stillness, the miracles that you're talking about, we're able to see. We're able to see them all around us. The fact that we woke up this morning, that we were able to watch this video, that we are inspired by people like yourself, that we have opportunities to really just experience our faith and make a difference in this world. Those are all miracles that are experiencing. And yeah, they're the big miracles that we're going to talk about that happened in my own life. But as you said beautifully, I mean, we all have these miracles that take place if we're available to those divine interruptions that God wants us to have every day.
What do you mean by available?
Well, because I think that what's happening right now is that we're living in a world in which we've kind of bought into this idea that more is better, that busy is good, and we all struggle with that as a priest of a community. There's no defined finish line. You're constantly working, and then once you finish that, you're always thinking of the next project. And where I oftentimes tell people is you have to be very careful. We talk about this in the book of what we call the weapons of mass distraction. And what I mean by that is that we are constantly being distracted because the enemy knows that if we are distracted in our own life, it means that we don't have time to spend time with God in our life. And so whether it be social media, whether it be our own work, whether it be our own unhealthy thoughts, whatever it is, those are the distractions that are in our lives that are happening. And if we're not taking inventory of what we're being distracted by, then what ends up happening is that we can live our life oftentimes feeling like empty, that we're not producing, that we're kind of wondering why we're here. There's a level of hollowness that we have as opposed to holiness that God wants us to have. And so that's why for us, it's an intentional availability that we're making every day, because on our own, our default setting is to continue to stay as busy as we can. And I oftentimes tell people the word busy in the letters that it makes up, busy. bound under Satan's yoke. So just remember that, bound under Satan's yoke. That just be careful of the busyness. That's why Christ would withdraw oftentimes
Yeah.
into the desert to
Yeah.
take that time to just be still, as we were talking about.
Yeah, I've been doing one of the things you talked about. One of the things in his sermons he talked about is just read the Bible. And so he said, read a couple of pages a day, just a couple of words, whatever it is, just get in the habit of it. And one of the things you said was start reading the gospel. So I just started with Matthew. And one of the things I did notice, a lot of verses, I think I'm in Luke now, said, and they went to find Christ and he was away along praying. And you can blow right by, but you start reading, as Christ had to go away and be alone. And before he chose his disciples, he was praying all night. Even God took that time. And so when I read it, I went, wow, if he had to take that time, what we must really have. That's one of the hardest things to do. But all right, so I love this story. So I'm going to do my best to set it up, and then I'll ask you some questions throughout it.
Sure.
I know you went to Kenya, and it was, how many years ago was this, Father?
This was about 7 years ago.
Okay. And you went to Kenya, and tell me why you went.
So I was asked to go with a mission team here from this country over to Kenya. I was in an area in Kenya called Turkana. Actually, it was a little bit outside of Turkana, but I was asked to kind of go more on a humanitarian trip. It was just a way to kind of make a difference, just through food, water, drink, and obviously to Christ. But that wasn't necessarily the primary purpose of us going there. It was really just trying to make a difference to an area of Kenya that was just really ravaged with poverty and just a lot of unfortunate circumstances that have been taking place over the last several years.
What did you expect before you got there?
It's a great question. I think what I was hoping is that, like most people, when you're going to a place like this and that you're going to help and on a humanitarian trip, you're hoping that you're going to help and make a difference in their life, to ease their burden. That definitely happened, but by far, as is the case so often when we're making a difference in someone's life, we benefit, I believe, greater those that we're actually benefiting. It was a transformational experience in my own life, and one that as I'm so happy to do with you today, is just to be able to share that with as many people as I can.
So I think you said when you got off the bus or the car, when you got there, the children were saying the word mata. Is that correct?
Right. So in this area that we were in, Bob, as many of us have pictures or ideas of what poverty is. And there is no doubt a tremendous amount of poverty that exists in the world. I had seen a lot of poverty. My doctorate work was in counseling in the urban setting in the inner city. And so I did a lot of work in the inner cities of Boston, saw a lot of things that were really just gut-wrenching. But this poverty was different. It still was difficult to see no matter how you see it, whether it was in Boston or overseas. But what was especially touching for me is when we were pulling up into this area, to consider yourself upper class in this area would be that you would have a mud house. Everyone else, the average Joe, if you will, simply lived on a desert floor. And when I say desert, I'm talking about literally there's nothing living. There may be one tree every 200 or 300 yards. And there, when we got off out of our car, we went to go we were pulling into this village, and the children, as if they were just synchronized, were running towards the vehicle, and they were yelling out this word that you just shared, this word mata, mata. And when they were saying it with tears, with a voice of sadness. These children that I want to paint a picture for are children that are 6, 7, 8 years old. At that time, my children were around that same age. And what they were asking for, what the word mata means, was water. They were yearning simply for a cup of water, because for many of the children that were there, they were all malnourished. I mean, in the typical visuals of what you see in a malnourished child, the extending of the abdomen area, definitely you would see children that were sometimes 8 or 9 years old that looked more like 3 and 4 years old, just the stagnation and growth. They had not had anything to drink in over 3 days. And so as we were there and just hearing that word, and what I oftentimes tell people is, it's one thing for me to explain to you that they were crying out for the word, crying out for water. But when you see a child begging for simply water, just water, not anything else, just a cup of water, it was gut wrenching. And to this day, I still visually see those children running up to the car, tapping on the hood, saying "Mata, Mata," in desperation.
Tell them how hot it was there, Father.
I mean, I live in Florida, so we consider 100 degrees or 105 to be hot. I think as most people would there, I would say at 8 in the morning, you're at 110. By the middle of the day, keep in mind there's not much shade. You would just simply take the cloth that you have and just simply put it over your head. It is unbelievably hot. So much so that just continuing to kind of just exacerbate the fact that these children and really the entire village were in need of water. The primary religion for a lot of these people a lot of them were African, more the indigenous religions of that time. So parts of Africa, some of them worship their ancestors. It's simply called ancestral worship. In some other areas, they feel that their ancestors shape who have gone on, will either punish them or reward them here in the present. So oftentimes when that happens, they'll say that someone from their ancestry was impacting them or punishing them. And then oftentimes they also have people that will interpret dreams as to what those mean. In this case, though, there was an elder, the chief of this tribe that was there, and but as we came up there, he was just observing us. Now he had heard of Jesus, of Christ, but many of the people there, this is one of the hardest things to believe. There's no electricity out there. This is at least 3 to 4 hours outside of any major city. These people don't have vehicles to simply walk wherever they're going. Something that you would see out of the National Geographic magazine, to be quite honest with you. And when they were there, Bob, what was so extraordinary is that this chief elder would just walk around us, and knowing that, and he shared with us something that was unbelievable. He knew that we were Christians, and he said, if your Christ is the true God, if your Christ is the true God, tell him to let it rain, because it had not rained in that area for a year. If he's the true God, tell him to make it rain, and if it rains, then we will believe in him. And that was that question alone was, obviously, not only were you visually taken back by the sight of all these people that were dying, begging for water, having nothing to eat, severely malnourished, but you also see the fact that these people are suffering. The average lifespan there is 50 years old. So most people don't live past 50. And so when you're 19 or 20 years old, you're middle age. So it was really just heart-wrenching on so many levels. I think that when we see heartache like this that we were seeing in Africa, your heart you can't help but simply say, I have to do something, and that's how I felt when he was saying, if your God is the true God, tell him to let it rain. And if it rains, then I'll believe in him.
Right.
It's a difficult question.
Tell him tell us what you thought then, and then what you did next.
Well, I mean, I have to be honest with you, and I tell people, at the end of the day, yes, I'm a priest, I'm a pastor of a church. But I'm also, at the end of the day, I'm a follower. I'm in the same boat with everyone else. I mean, and so I'm yearning, just like all of us, to grow in my faith, to grow to be the person that I am. But when you're visually seeing that hunger, visually seeing the thirst, and you're knowing that someone is going to die very shortly if it does not rain, and they're asking you to pray for them, and to pray that it rains, so that the people can actually physically live, it's daunting. And I tell people all the time when I'm sharing this story that, I did what, probably most pastors would do. I just simply said, I'll pray, but it's ultimately in God's hands, and that we're going to help you out as best as we can on this trip and to make a difference, but trust in God. But in the back of my mind, the human side of me was thinking, my gosh, someone is going to die if they don't get fed and drink something. So we gathered, Bob, in a circle, all the people that were with us from our trip, and we gathered in a circle and just simply began to pray and just pray.
Just you were with all of them too?
Well, we were praying in a circle, just all the people that were part of our group, because keep in mind, those people had never heard of Christ. They never understood what prayer is, except for that the chief elder. So the people, as we were praying, it was so beautiful, would kind of come in and out of our circle, like just looking at our faces, listening to what we were praying. And there was a translator obviously there because they didn't speak English, but we were just praying and praying from our hearts. And I would love to share with our listeners that, it immediately began to rain, and it began to that they were able to drink, but that didn't happen. We prayed that entire night. At the end, we were so tired, we went to bed. It did not rain. You could hear the children still talking to their mothers, begging Mata for water. And we went to bed hearing that noise. But tomorrow came, and what was so beautiful, that following morning, it was like a movie. We got up, again, very, very hot, 110 degrees, 8 o'clock in the morning. But friends, there were clouds, dark blue clouds that would ascend from the east, west, north, and south. And they just simply came on top of this campgrounds where all of these people who were begging for water were. And they began to look up, and it began to rain. And I'm not talking about little drizzle. I'm not talking about a little sprinkle. It started raining buckets of rain. And it was so powerful. The rain came down so fast and so much that it created a river of water.
Oh, beautiful. Look at this.
Within an instant, friends, they had already created a song to this Jesus who made it rain, praising him, thanking him for letting it rain. And that day, we ended up welcoming into the Orthodox Church, welcoming into our church, welcoming into Christianity, about 50 people that were in that village who saw it rain. It was probably one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. And to this day, there is a church. Most of those people became Christians. And there's a priest who ministers to that community out there every week. It's just a powerful story. And to kind of get back to that earlier point of these divine interruptions that God gives us, is that they're transformational for us. And yeah, I mean, what we oftentimes take for granted when we go to a restaurant and we're like, and we're ordering water, sometimes they give us these huge cups of water. I cannot leave there without finishing the water. And I've got my family doing the same thing, because that water people are literally dying for, just for a cup of water, just for the soothing of a cup of water.
I'm telling you guys, you got to read this thing. You're going to love it. And I think that's 2 pages out of that book. Honest to God, it's 2 pages. And I go, holy man. But anyway, I thank you for sharing that with us.
I just, first of all, thank you, Bob, for the opportunity to be with you. I treasure our friendship, and I just treasure you and your family, what you guys are doing. And I just would encourage you, as listeners, I mean, that when you're listening to what is on this particular platform and what faith, hope, and love meant to you, the greatest witnesses of what we're doing on this platform or what we're doing in life is ourselves. And so if you find this ministry beneficial, tell your friends, share with your friends and your family. These are the small things that we can do to make a difference in this world. Let's leverage the technology that God has given us to truly make a difference. And the second thing I would do is just always allow yourself to be available. look for those divine interruptions that God gives us, because if not, if you don't set the priorities in your life, I always tell people someone else will. And so may God give you strength as you journey your walk of faith.
Before I lose you, tell them where they can get, and I'm going to say goodbye to you as well, because I promise you I'll get you out of here by 12:30. So, Brother Louh, tell them where they can find you. I watch on YouTube. Is it the Louhs at YouTube?
Yeah, all of our platforms are on the Louhs, and that last name is Louhs. So we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all under the headings of the Louhs. And if you're interested in purchasing the book, by the way, all the proceeds of this book go to outreach ministries, most of which has gone to the American Cancer Society in memory of our dads. So just so you know that when you're purchasing this book, it's going to a great cause. But you can find that book by going to ancientfaith.com. That's our publisher, and simply put in the search engine, Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan.
It's wonderful, you guys. Father, I love you, man. You're the best. He is the best sermon homily person out there. And I'm not talking just Greek Orthodox. I'm talking anywhere. Go watch his stuff.
Thank God. Thank God. Thank you. Thank God.
All right, brother. I love you, man.
I love you too.
Next time.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.